You've seen the headlines, right? Robots are coming for our jobs. But the latest Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, well, it tells a much more complicated and honestly, a way more interesting story. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all that noise and see what the next few years actually have in store for your career, based on their data.
Okay, so what's the biggest surprise? You might want to sit down for this. Forget mass unemployment. The report actually projects a net increase of 78 million jobs globally by 2030. Yeah, you heard that right, a net gain. But, and this is a big but, hold on, because that positive number, it's hiding a much, much more turbulent story underneath.
And this is that turbulence. We're talking about a 22% job churn rate. So what does that even mean? It means for every 5 jobs that exist right now, 1 is going to fundamentally change. Think about that. How is it going to happen? Well, by creating a whopping 170 million new roles, while at the same time, 92 million old ones get displaced. This isn't just a little shift, folks. It's a massive tectonic reshuffling of the entire labor market.
Which brings us to what the report actually calls the Great Job Reshuffle. The key thing to get here is that it's not really about jobs just disappearing into thin air. It's about a fundamental change in the types of jobs out there, and just as important, the skills that are required to do them. And to really get our heads around this, we have to understand that key term, job churn. So, job churn, think of it as the engine driving this whole transformation. It's the total number of jobs created and destroyed. Here's a way to picture it. That net gain of 78 million jobs, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real story, the churn, is that massive, invisible part of the iceberg under the water. It represents the full, true scale of the disruption that we're all going to feel.
So you're probably wondering, what's causing all of this historic level of churn? Well, the report boils it all down to 5 really powerful macro trends that are fundamentally reshaping, well, pretty much our entire world and how we work in it.
All right, here they are. First, you've got technological change, and you know that's mainly driven by AI and automation. Then there's the green transition, this huge shift to a low-carbon economy. Third, geoeconomic fragmentation. That's a fancy way of saying global supply chains and trade relationships are all getting shaken up. Then, of course, economic uncertainty, with everyone worried about inflation and slower growth. And finally, major demographic shifts. Aging populations in some countries, huge youth bulges in others. Now, any one of these is a major force on its own, but put them all together, you get a perfect storm of change.
Okay, so while all 5 of those forces are powerful, there's one that stands head and shoulders above the rest. When employers were asked what's going to drive the most transformation in their business, a massive 86% pointed to AI. I mean, look at that. It completely eclipses robotics and even green energy tech. This tells us something really important. AI isn't just another trend on the list. It is the trend.
All right, so this brings us right to the core of this whole thing. With all these forces in play, especially AI, what does the job market actually look like? Who wins and who loses? Which roles are about to boom and which ones are, well, facing the biggest decline?
And wow, the divide here it's stark. On one side, you have the fastest growing jobs, and they are almost all in tech and the green transition. We're talking AI specialists, data experts, renewable energy engineers. But then you look at the other side, the fastest declining jobs. These are the very roles being automated by those same technologies: bank tellers, clerks, cashiers. The pattern here is crystal clear, isn't it? But here's where the story gets a little more nuanced, a little more interesting. Fastest growing is all about the percentage of growth. But what about the jobs that are going to add the most people in just sheer numbers to the workforce? The answer here, might surprise you. So get this. The single biggest source of job growth in absolute numbers isn't in tech. It's farm workers, with a projected 35 million new jobs. And right behind them are roles that are core to the physical and care economies. We're talking delivery drivers, construction workers, and nurses. And this is such a crucial insight, right? While those tech jobs grow the fastest by percentage, it's these essential, hands-on roles where millions and millions of people are actually going to find work. Okay, so knowing which jobs are growing, that's half the battle. The other half, and maybe the most important part, is understanding the skills you'll need to actually get them. And that brings us to the most practical part of this explainer. How do you, personally, prepare for this great reshuffle? All right, let's start with this number, 39%. Employers expect that, on average, 39% of a worker's core skills are going to need to change by 2030. Let that sink in.
That's nearly 2/5 of what you do today becoming outdated or needing a major upgrade in just a few years. The era of learning one skill and then just coasting on it for a lifetime? Yeah, that's officially over.
So which skills are growing the fastest? Well, surprise, surprise, it's a tech trifecta. Right at the top, AI and big data. That's number one. Followed very closely by networks and cybersecurity. And then third, a more general but absolutely vital, technological literacy. These are the hard skills that are in the highest demand, period.
But wait, it's not all about tech. In fact, in a world that's getting saturated with AI, our uniquely human skills are becoming a premium. The report highlights things like creative thinking, resilience and agility, and just plain old curiosity and lifelong learning as some of the most rapidly growing skills. And the takeaway here is huge. As machines get better at handling the routine stuff, our ability to think creatively, to adapt, and to just keep learning, that becomes our single greatest asset.
This really breaks down the training challenge that's staring us in the face. Okay, so for every 100 workers, a lot of them, about 41, won't need new training. And another 48 or so will get some kind of upskilling or reskilling. But look at that last slice. 11 out of every 100 workers are at risk. They need new skills, but they're not likely to get the training to acquire them. That 11%, that represents the core challenge we all face in making this transition work for everyone.
And that leads us to our final, and maybe the most important section of all. Because the future, it's not set in stone. The way technology actually integrates into our work, that's a choice. And it's a choice we're all making, right now.
You know, the report really argues that everything boils down to this one single question for the next decade. Are we going to use AI to augment our human capabilities, to make us better and smarter at our jobs? Or are we going to use it simply to automate tasks and replace people? The path we choose here is literally going to define the next decade of work.
Because ultimately, that whole humans versus machines story you hear all the time, it's kind of a distraction. The reality is the future is about humans with machines. The disruption is absolutely real, but so is the opportunity. The challenge isn't if we're going to collaborate with technology, it's how we're going to do it. So the real question is, who gets to design that collaboration?